My sister tricked our parents into signing their business over to her and said, "It's mine now, so you can work for me." I thought she won until my grandfather's lawyer said, "Actually, there's a contract clause you should read." When she did, she screamed in panic. I'll never forget the smug look on my sister's face when she sat our parents down and said, "It's mine now, so you can work for me." That was the moment everything changed. Our parents ran a successful business, a small but well-known family-owned chain of bakeries in Chicago. It wasn't a massive corporation, but it was our family's pride and legacy. My grandfather started it from nothing, pouring everything into it, and when he passed, my parents took over. It was understood that one day, it would pass down to the next generation. For years, my sister, Sophia, had been angling to take control. She always had a way of manipulating people, charming on the surface but ruthless underneath. She played the perfect daughter, always agreeing with our parents, always acting like she had their best interests at heart. But I knew better. I had seen how she operated. I had seen her talk her way out of situations that should have gotten her in serious trouble, and I knew she was always thinking 10 steps ahead. Me? I was the opposite. I worked hard, showed up every day, and did my part, but I wasn't about to grovel for their approval like she did. I figured my work would speak for itself. I wasn't expecting to be handed anything. I just thought when the time came, my parents would make a fair decision. I should have known better. The betrayal, it happened fast. One day, everything was business as usual. The next, my parents sat me down, looking uncomfortable. My dad cleared his throat and said, "We've decided to transfer ownership of the business to Sophia." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "What?" I asked, thinking I must have misheard them. My mom gave me a sympathetic look. "It's already done," she said quietly. My sister sat across from me with that smug little smirk she always had when she knew she had one. "Yeah," she said. "It's all legal. It's mine now." I turned back to my parents. "Why?" Sophia answered before they could. "Because I asked." It turned out she had spent months working on them, convincing them it was the smart thing to do. That I wasn't really interested in running the business, that I wasn't responsible enough to handle it, that she was the only logical choice. She had them sign the papers before I even knew what was happening. And now, she was sitting there, acting like she was graciously offering them a chance to keep working for her. My parents realized their mistake too late. Reality hit them hard after that. They thought she would keep them involved, that it would still be the family business, just with Sophia leading it. They were wrong. She started making changes immediately. She cut costs, slashed employee hours, and ignored quality control. She fired longtime employees who had been with us for years. She made my parents feel like they had to ask permission to make decisions they had been making for decades. The worst part? She made them sign employment contracts. Employment contracts. For their own business. They went from being owners to employees overnight. They were miserable, and I could see it. But whenever I tried to bring it up, they shut down. They didn't want to admit they had been played. So, I bided my time. Then the lawyer called one afternoon. I got a call from my grandfather's lawyer. He asked me to meet him. He sounded urgent. When I got there, he wasted no time. "Your sister made a mistake," he said. That got my attention. Apparently, my grandfather had put a clause in the original business contract years ago when he first passed it down to my parents. It was buried in the fine print, something no one had really paid attention to, until now. The clause said that if ownership of the business was ever transferred outside of direct inheritance, then the original contract terms would trigger a mandatory reassessment. In simple terms, if my parents gave the business away instead of passing it down properly, the contract had to be reviewed by the estate lawyer and could be legally contested. And guess what? Sophia had rushed the process. She was so eager to snatch up the business that she hadn't let the lawyer do his due diligence. She hadn't realized that by forcing them to sign it over, she had activated the reassessment clause. The lawyer looked at me and smiled. "That means you have a case." The confrontation, I didn't waste any time. I gathered my parents and brought them to the lawyer's office. Sophia had no idea what was coming. When we walked in, she was lounging in the chair, scrolling on her phone. She barely looked up. "What's this about?" she asked, bored. The lawyer didn't play games. He placed the documents in front of her and said, "You should read this." She glanced at it, rolling her eyes until she saw the clause. I watched her face drain of color as she read it. Then she got to the part where it said that because she had taken ownership in a way that violated the original agreement, the contract could be overturned in court. That's when she screamed. "Sophia loses control." Sophia shot up from her chair so fast that it nearly tipped over. "What the hell is this?" she shrieked, gripping the papers so tightly her knuckles went white. The lawyer stayed calm. "It's a contract clause your grandfather put in place to protect the business from being taken unfairly." She turned to our parents, eyes wide and furious. "You didn't tell me about this." My mom looked away, ashamed. My dad sighed. We didn't know, he admitted. Sophia let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. No, this is a mistake. This doesn't mean anything. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. Actually, it means a lot. He tapped the document. This clause allows for a full legal review of the transfer, and given the circumstances, there's a very high chance a judge would overturn it. I could see it happening in real time. Sophia was unraveling. She had thought she had won. She thought she had everything locked down. But now? Now the ground was crumbling under her feet. She started flipping through the papers, scanning them frantically. Her hands were shaking. Then, her eyes landed on something, and I saw a flicker of hope in her expression. No, she muttered. No, wait, she pointed at a section near the bottom. It says here that if the current owner disputes the clause, it'd have to go to court. She snapped her head up, her smugness creeping back in. And I'm the owner. I own the business. So you can't just take it back. The lawyer nodded. That's correct. You can dispute it. Then he smiled, and something about that smile made her falter. But there's something else you should know. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out another document. Your grandfather added a stipulation, he said, sliding it toward her. If a dispute goes to court, all business operations must be frozen until a ruling is made. Sophia blinked. What? That means, he continued, that if you choose to fight this, the bakery chain will have to shut down. Indefinitely. No revenue, no sales, nothing. And given how long these cases can drag out, he shrugged. It could be years before you see a single cent. Silence. I watched as the full weight of what he was saying crashed down on her. If she fought this in court, she wouldn't just be risking the business, she'd be bleeding money for who knows how long. Her hands curled into fists. You can't do this, she whispered. The lawyer's voice was firm. Your grandfather did this. To protect the family business from exactly this kind of situation. Her face twisted in frustration. So what am I supposed to do? Just give it back? That would be the smartest option, the lawyer said simply. She refused to give up, but Sophia was never one to take a loss gracefully. Over the next few days, she scrambled to find a way out. She called different lawyers, trying to find someone who could counter the contract. She tried to renegotiate with our parents, offering them a cut of the profits if they agreed to let her keep the business. She even had the audacity to call me and say, if you just back off, I'll give you a management position. I laughed in her face. Then, she got desperate. I found out she had been secretly moving money out of the business accounts into her personal ones. She must have figured that if she was going to lose, she'd at least drain as much cash as possible before it happened. But she underestimated one thing. The employees turned on her. What Sophia didn't realize was that the employees hated her. She had come in like a tyrant, slashing hours, cutting corners, treating people like garbage. And people talk. Word got around that she was messing with the business finances. Employees started quitting in waves. Vendors started pulling out of their contracts. The bakeries started losing money fast. And then someone tipped off the IRS. It turned out that when Sophia transferred the business to herself, she hadn't paid the necessary taxes on it. It was a massive oversight, something she had either ignored or thought she could get away with. But now that she was moving money around suspiciously, it drew attention. And when the IRS comes knocking, you don't get to ignore them. The final blow. The last time I saw her before everything truly fell apart, she looked rough. Her perfect hair was a mess, she had dark circles under her eyes, and for the first time in her life, she didn't look confident. She looked terrified. She called a family meeting. We sat around our parents' dining table, the same table where she had once smugly told us she owned the business and we could work for her. But now her voice was shaky. I think we should make a deal, she said. I crossed my arms. A deal? She swallowed hard. Yeah. I'll give the business back, but I want financial security. A percentage of the profits. A guarantee that I won't be left with nothing. I stared at her. You stole the business. You fired loyal employees. You tried to bleed it dry. And now that it's crashing down, you want a safety net? Her jaw clenched. I just don't want to be ruined. The lawyer, who was present for the meeting, adjusted his glasses and said, Unfortunately, Sophia, you already are. That's when she finally broke. Sophia's final gamble. Sophia stared at the lawyer like she had misheard him. What do you mean I'm already ruined? The lawyer sighed. Even if you return the business, you're in serious trouble. The IRS investigation isn't something you can just walk away from. The missing funds, the unpaid taxes, those are federal issues. My parents looked horrified. The IRS? My mom whispered. My dad ran a hand down his face. Oh, Sophia, what did you do? Sophia started shaking her head rapidly. No, this isn't happening. This can't be happening. She turned to me, desperation creeping into her voice. You have to help me fix this. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. Help you? After everything you pulled? I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she snapped. I laughed bitterly. You tricked mom and dad into signing over their life's work. You fired loyal employees. You tried to squeeze every dollar out of the company while treating it like your personal ATM. And now, after all that, you want me to help. Sophia was breathing hard, like she was trying to hold back a full-blown panic attack. Then, as if a switch flipped in her head, she straightened up and took a deep breath. And then she tried to bluff her way out. Okay, she said, forcing a smirk. Fine, maybe I made some mistakes. But you can't prove I did anything illegal. The lawyer didn't even blink. Actually, we can. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out another stack of papers. The employees you fired? They've given sworn statements about your financial misconduct. The vendors you refused to pay? They provided records. And the forensic accountant we hired? He slid a document across the table. He traced every cent you tried to hide. Sophia's face drained of color. And then the final blow. On top of that, the lawyer continued, flipping to another page, we received a formal request from the IRS to cooperate with their investigation. Which means, he looked up at her. Your bank accounts? They've been flagged. You're already under financial review. My mother gasped. My father looked at her in shock. And Sophia? She sat completely still. Sophia's secret weapon for the first time since this started, I thought she might actually admit defeat. But then she did something none of us saw coming. She slowly sat up straight, took a deep breath, and smiled. Oh, you think you have me cornered, she said, shaking her head. You really think I'm just going to roll over? I frowned. What are you talking about? She laced her fingers together, looking almost relaxed. Then she said, I have something you don't know about. And if you try to push me out, I'll use it. A chill ran down my spine. What did you do? My dad asked warily. She leaned in, her voice dripping with smugness. Let's just say, I have some leverage that could make all of this very difficult for you. The lawyer, for the first time, looked slightly concerned. Miss Carter, if you're referring to anything illegal, I'd strongly advise against making threats. But she wasn't bluffing. And when she revealed what she had done, everything got so much worse. The blackmail bombshell. Sophia reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. She held it up, twirling it between her fingers. This, she said slowly, contains information that could ruin more than just me. Nobody spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. What the hell is on that? She smirked. Records. Conversations. Proof of, let's call them creative accounting choices that Dad and Grandpa made back in the day. My dad stiffened. My mom's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, Sophia, no, oh, yes, she cut in. See, while I was going through the company records, I found some interesting financial decisions. Unreported income. Cash transactions that never made it to the books. And wouldn't you know it? Some of them go way back. She turned to my father. Isn't that right, Dad? He looked sick. Sophia, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. What did you do? She leaned back in her chair, utterly pleased with herself. I made sure that if I go down, I won't be alone. A dangerous choice. Now we had a real problem. If she was telling the truth, and knowing Sophia, she probably was, then this wasn't just about getting the business back anymore. If those records got out, it wouldn't just be her facing legal trouble. It would be our entire family. The room was dead silent. My parents looked like they had aged 10 years in the last 5 minutes. I clenched my jaw. So what's your play? She shrugged. Simple. I get to keep the business. You all back off. No lawsuits. No court battles. No IRS interference. She dangled the flash drive. And this? It stays a family secret. I felt sick. She had trapped us. The lawyer looked troubled but not defeated. He studied Sophia for a long moment, then turned to my dad. Mr. Carter, he said carefully, I need to know the truth. Is there anything in that file that could put you in real legal danger? My father hesitated. Then, finally, he sighed. There might be. Sophia grinned. She thought she had one. Again. But she had underestimated something important. Because while my father had secrets, so did I. And if she thought she was the only one capable of playing dirty, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. The truth comes out. Silence filled the room. Sophia sat there, twirling that flash drive like she held a loaded gun. My parents looked like they had just been handed a death sentence. The lawyer, usually calm and composed, now wore a tight-lipped expression. And me? I was furious. I had watched my sister manipulate people my whole life, but this was low, even for her. She wasn't just blackmailing us, she was blackmailing our own parents. And she was doing it with a smirk. I leaned forward. You're bluffing. Her smirk widened. You sure about that? My dad closed his eyes, rubbing his temples like he was trying to will himself out of this nightmare. My mom looked on the verge of tears. Sophia, please, she whispered. This isn't the way. She scoffed. Oh! And what's the way, Mom? Letting you all strip me of everything while you pretend to be the victims? No. I did what I had to do. I clenched my fists under the table. You mean you did what you always do, screw people over and expect to get away with it? She laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, don't act so righteous, Mark. You think you're so much better than me? Please. She sat back in her chair, crossing her arms. You don't get it. I had to fight for this. You? You just expected it. You assumed one day you'd just inherit the business without ever earning it. I stared at her in disbelief. Earning it? You tricked our parents into signing it over. She rolled her eyes. Yeah, because I was smart enough to do what you weren't. I made sure I wasn't left behind. That hit a nerve. Left behind. I repeated. Sophia, Mom and Dad spent their whole lives taking care of us. Grandpa built this business from the ground up. And you just wanted to take it for yourself. Her eyes flashed. And you didn't? No, I said, my voice firm. I wanted it to stay in the family. Not under you. Someone who doesn't give a damn about the employees, the legacy, or anything other than herself. She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't finished. And let's talk about this blackmail of yours, I continued. You think that flash drive is your safety net? You think you can just wave it around and keep the business? She hesitated. And that's when I dropped my own bombshell. Her fatal mistake, I pulled out my own flash drive and tossed it on the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of her. Her eyes narrowed. What is this? Proof, I said simply. She snorted. Of what? That you're desperate. I leaned in. Of your financial fraud. She went still. The lawyer took the flash drive, plugged it into his laptop, and his expression darkened immediately. He turned the screen toward my parents, showing page after page of Sophia's embezzlement. Company funds siphoned into her personal accounts. Fake invoices to non-existent vendors. Money that was supposed to go to employee benefits, funneled into luxury purchases. Recognize these transactions, Sophia? I asked. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Then I delivered the final blow. You tried to cover your tracks, I said. But you made one mistake. You didn't realize that I still had access to the original financial records before you took over. I gestured at the screen. Every account you tried to hide? Every cent you tried to move? I found it. Panic flashed across her face. The lawyer cleared his throat. Ms. Carter, what we have here is substantial evidence of corporate fraud. If this were presented to the authorities, you wouldn't just lose the business. He folded his hands. You could be facing serious criminal charges. Sophia's breathing grew uneven. You're bluffing, she stammered. This isn't real. I shrugged. Want to find out? She turned to my parents, her eyes wild. You're not gonna let him do this to me, right? My dad, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. His voice was quiet but firm. I don't even know who you are anymore. That hit her harder than anything I had said. Mom wiped away silent tears. Sophia, why? Sophia gritted her teeth. Because I was sick of being second place. She slammed her hands on the table, shaking with anger. Do you have any idea what it was like growing up knowing that Mark was always going to get everything? That no matter what I did, I was always going to be the extra child? I made my own way. And yeah, maybe I did things that weren't perfect, but at least I didn't sit around waiting for someone to hand me something. I stared at her, stunned. Sophia, my mom whispered. But she wasn't done. And you, she pointed at me. You act like you're so much better than me. Like you deserve this business more than I do. But you didn't fight for it, did you? You just thought it would fall into your lap. I shook my head. That's not true. She scoffed. Isn't it? I sighed. You're right about one thing, I never fought for the business. Because I didn't think I had to. I thought we were a family. I thought our parents would make the right decision, that we'd run it together someday. But you. I gestured around. You turned this into a war. She swallowed hard. The lawyer cleared his throat. Ms. Carter, at this point, you have two choices. She looked at him. 1, we take all this to court. You'll lose the business, the IRS will continue their investigation, and there's a strong chance you'll be criminally charged. Sophia paled. Or, he continued, you can sign over the business, willingly, and this stays within the family. No lawsuits. No criminal charges. No public disgrace. Sophia's lip trembled. She looked at the flash drive in front of her. Then at me. Then at our parents. Finally, after what felt like forever, she reached for the pen. Her hands shook as she signed the papers. And just like that, it was over. She left without another word. No apology. No goodbye. Just grabbed her bag and stormed out. The silence after she was gone felt heavy. Mom broke down in quiet sobs. My dad sat with his head in his hands. I just sat there, staring at the documents that had almost cost us everything. The business was back where it belonged. But at what cost? Days passed. Sophia didn't reach out. Neither did we. Then, about a week later, I got a text from Sophia. All it said was, "I hope you're happy." I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. Because honestly, I wasn't sure if I was. I had one. The business was saved. My parents wouldn't lose everything. But I lost my sister in the process. And as much as I hated her for what she did, a part of me wondered if, deep down, she had always felt like she was losing us. Maybe she was just trying to take something before it could be taken from her. Maybe that's why, in the end, she had nothing left.